This is a film about two towns, an old town and a new, and the name of both is West Ham. In the valley of the River Lee, where it joins the Thames 4 miles east of London Bridge, are many canals lined with factories where they make paint and varnish, chemicals and gin, where they process sugar and grind flour. And close by are London's largest docks. Soot from the factories, soot from the funnels of liners in the dock. It drifts over the rooftops, creeps into bedrooms, and dirties the washing on the line. The canals and the coal barges, the railways and the factories, all the muck and muddle typical of the chaotic development of our industrial towns, busy, noisy, and dirty. This is West Ham. And in the midst of it all, a boy. His name is Harry Jackson, and he is 10 years old. He goes to Drew Road School in Silvertown, a massive 3-story school of the sort they built all over London in the years before 1900, when bricks were cheap, and bricklayers no less cheap. The school stands on the brink of the dock, where Harry's father works. 340 children are on the registers of Drew Road School, and this is the top class. Next year, these children will go to a secondary school. Harry may perhaps go to a grammar school, for he is an intelligent boy. Not brilliant, but his teachers find him thoughtful and interested. He is interested in what he sees from the roof playground of his school, for when they built Drew Road School, there was little room left in Silvertown for playgrounds. On the one side, Harry can look down on the dock, and on the other lies a huddle of houses, and among them the house where Harry lives. The houses, too, extend to the very brink of the dock, overshadowed on the one side by these monsters of the sea and dwarfed on the other by the great Silvertown factories. From the tower of the highest of all the factories, the Thames Sugar Refinery, we look down on the whole district. To the south, the Thames, and then the factory belt, and alongside the Stratford to Woolwich Railway, and then the houses lying between the factories and the dock. This is no place for a boy to grow up in. But boys are philosophic in such matters, content to accept things as they are. This is Harry's native place. He knows it every yard, and it has never occurred to him that it might be different. The front windows of the house where Harry lives look out onto the railway, and 3 days in 4, when the wind blows southwest, the smoke from passing trains drifts against the house front. Windows are rarely opened in Harry's house. Most boys in West Ham live in houses like this. By modern standards, they are poor houses, with front windows opening straight upon the street. Their sanitary arrangements are crude, and they have no bathrooms. Built in the last century, some as long ago as 1840, they cover most of Canning Town, Stratford, and Plaster. Harry's house was built in 1887 on one of the estates hurriedly erected for the workers in the docks and factories of Thames Side. The first streets sprang up soon after Silver's rubber works was built, and this early print shows the original factory buildings with the workers' houses ranged alongside. Other townships sprang up nearby. They met and merged. There was no plan. West Ham just happened.
I am Harry's teacher. I tried to tell my class something of the history of West Ham. The children find it hard to believe that there was a time when West Ham was a place of green fields and country lanes. I show them this map of West Ham in 1800, when there were fewer than 10,000 people in the three villages of Stratford, West Ham, and Plaistow. Wanstead Road, on the site of the old Roman road, was the main route east and west, and today West Ham Lane, Plaistow Road, Greengate Street, and Prince Regent Lane follow the track of the old lanes that used to lead from Stratford to the south. Barking Road had not long been built, and there were no railways or docks. When the Eastern Counties Railway was constructed in 1839, Stratford Newtown grew up, and the extension of the line to Silvertown encouraged the growth of factories in the south of the borough. The Victoria Dock was opened in 1855, followed by the London, Tilbury and Southend Railway and the Northern Outfall Sewer. Housing and factories grew rapidly, and grazing land quickly disappeared. The building of the Albert Dock in 1880 marks the period of the most rapid uncontrolled growth throughout the borough. The population reached its peak in 1925, but building on the few remaining open spaces continued until the outbreak of war. The children are interested when I tell them how Charles Dickens came to West Ham 90 years ago. He called it a place of refuge for offensive trades, oil boilers, gut spinners, varnish makers, and printers' ink makers. They are interested, too, to learn that until the First Education Act, there were many children who had never been to school. The new act meant that many new schools had to be built. They should have been surrounded with green playing fields. Instead, they rose in a jungle of bricks and looked out on chimney pots. Acre by acre, West Ham had been covered with dismal houses and factories. By the turn of the century, many of these were already ugly slums. Whole areas were in decay. The brickwork crumbled, and in the rotting timbers of the houses, vermin took hold. Yet children continued to live and play, and sometimes to die, in these crowded streets of decaying houses. These things the children in my class do understand, for although today West Ham school children are better dressed and better cared for than ever before, many of these children live in overcrowded homes themselves, and the street is still their most convenient playground. During the first quarter of this century, West Ham's difficulties were made more acute every year by the steadily rising population. In 1830, there had been only 10,000 people in the borough. A steady rise began, and after 1840, the rapid building of factories brought in thousands of workers, until by 1914, there were nearly 300,000 people in the borough. The First World War caused a temporary fall, but by 1925, the population had risen to its peak of 318,000. A decline set in, and people left at the rate of 5,000 a year until 1939, when evacuation caused a sudden slump. Before the end of the war, it again began to rise until it reached the present figure of 174,000. The bell has rung for the afternoon play break. The children are back in the present, with little thought for the past or the future. But in the classroom, one boy remains, looking at the maps. I have struck a chord in one young mind. The lesson has not been wasted.
The haphazard development of West Ham, which Harry's teacher has described, created vast traffic problems for which there is no easy solution. The docks in the south act as a great magnet for road traffic, and heavy vehicles bound for Tidal Basin and Silvertown rumble through narrow residential streets. They are a nuisance and a danger, but they have no other direct road. This back street in Stratford, for example, is a regular shortcut for lorry drivers, and every year they take their toll of children's lives. This boy, playing amid the noise of traffic, may go home to sleep in such a house as this. How should you like to sleep in this bedroom? Another legacy from West Ham's past is the bad siting of her industries. In almost every part of the borough are to be found houses standing in the shadow of factories. The separation of housing and factory areas is perhaps the most difficult of all the problems confronting West Ham. The early years of this century brought better housing standards. Streets were wide and straight. Schools were given comparatively spacious playgrounds. The houses, too, were roomier, and though they still had tiny kitchens and few had bathrooms, they were the pride of many a young married couple on the new estates. But to our eyes, these streets are unbearably monotonous. Every house has a bay window like every other house. The back additions were barrack-like, each cutting off light and air from its neighbour. The chimney pots stand in rigid lines, and even the trees were regimented as if they had been lamp-posts. The gridiron layout of these estates, moreover, as seen in this Plaistow area built about 50 years ago, created danger spots for traffic at every road junction. These estates were infinitely better than the slums of the 19th century, but they were still without open spaces and other amenities. They conformed to the new building bylaws, but they were not planned. Town planners today call this type of development bylaw building. It is characterized by long streets of deadly sameness. But Harry, picking his way home across the dusty bomb sites, is no longer thinking of the past. For this is the West Ham he knows, a town of rubble-strewn gaps and patched houses. It is the only West Ham he has ever known, for when the raids began in 1940, Harry was only 2 years old. He spent his childhood among the rubble and the charred beams. The bomb sites have been his playing fields. And West Ham has many bomb sites. From the first terrible daylight raid in September 1940, in which whole districts in the south of the borough were laid waste, West Ham endured every phase of the air attack. On her few square miles, there fell 1,500 HE bombs, 33 rockets, 29 parachute mines, 68 fly bombs, 1,100 incendiaries. Not a single house in West Ham escaped damage. 13,500 were totally destroyed. The open spaces which West Ham had so long lacked were created overnight, but thousands were rendered homeless. And at the end of the war, her century-old housing problem was more acute than ever before. During the war, West Ham's population had shrunk drastically, but now the people came back. Even before the raids were over, they began to return. The sirens still wailed, and the rockets crashed regularly, but the streets began to fill again. Then, in the last few months of the war, there began a great movement of women and children from the evacuation areas back to battered West Ham. In 18 months, 46,000 people came back to the borough. In many cases, their old homes had gone. They found rooms, they squeezed in with friends, they squatted. Somehow, somewhere, they found a place and called it home. They were back in West Ham. They were home. Then demobilization began, and West Ham soldiers came back. Every evening the workers pour from the factories, and the crowds wait for the buses to take them to their homes. What sort of homes are they? Where do they all live? Some live in shored-up houses like this. Houses whose tired old walls were ripe for demolition even before the bomb blast shook them. Soon they must come down. Some of these houses are dangerous, yet families remain in them and refuse to leave. This house collapsed a few weeks after this picture was taken. Many shops, too, stand in crutches awaiting their inevitable fate, while name boards alone mark the sites of West Ham's 49 public houses destroyed by bombing. In all parts of the borough stand the drab memorials of war, proclaiming that the reconstruction of West Ham, long overdue, is now an urgent necessity. Even during the war, there were those who saw that the very magnitude of the problems confronting West Ham provided opportunities that must not be missed. This, they said, was the chance for which West Ham had been waiting for half a century. The Borough Council appointed a Reconstruction Committee in 1941. Members arrive at the Town Hall for a meeting, as they have done every month for the past 7 years. It would have been easy for the Council and its officers, beset with all the problems of the war, to become preoccupied with anxieties of the moment. They never lost sight of the immediate needs of their people, but at the same time they worked steadily on plans for the new West Ham that they would build after the war. It would be a different West Ham, they said, a place where children had room to play, where the smoke and the noise of industry no longer penetrated to the bedroom. And it was good, amid the anxieties of war, to keep hold upon a vision of the future. The detailed planning of this gigantic undertaking, for to rebuild an old town is an even greater task than building a new one, was entrusted to the borough architect. The committee proceeded to business, knowing that their work could have no early reward. Only the younger of these men and women will see more than the beginning of the great task of reconstruction that they have planned.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very heavy program before us, and I propose to proceed straight to the agenda. The first item thereon being the report of the town clerk.
Yes, West Ham has indeed a heavy program. And the first task was to provide homes quickly for the thousands who found themselves with nowhere to live. The war was still on, labour and materials for permanent houses were unobtainable, and temporary huts were the only solution. And over 1,000 two-year huts had to be erected in West Ham. In addition to the two-year huts, 550 of these bungalows were built. In all, West Ham erected more temporary houses than any other local authority in the London area. The first were erected and occupied during the fly bomb period, and some were later destroyed by rockets. Sites for these temporary houses had to be very carefully selected, and the architects department, having already prepared outline plans for the entire reconstruction of West Ham, were able to put them where they would not hamper permanent development. 4 main areas were selected: Tidal Basin, an area north of West Ham Station, Stratford New Town, and Queen's Road. These are areas for early redevelopment. Indeed, in some of them, permanent buildings are already replacing these huts. None of the bungalows was erected within these areas, sites for these being chosen in parts of the borough which it is intended to redevelop in 10 years' time. Other temporary buildings were also needed. Here is a prefabricated day nursery. The school clinic occupies a wooden hut. And the architect's department, where the new West Ham is being planned, is itself housed in temporary huts. There is even a prefabricated pub. But these must all go, as one by one, the areas in which they stand become ready for redevelopment. Each area is considered in turn, and the borough architect, Mr. Thomas E. North, himself born in West Ham, submits models of his proposals and discusses details of the layout with members of the Reconstruction Committee. A single model gives a clearer picture of a scheme than many plans and drawings. Formidable difficulties arise from the scattered nature of West Ham's industries, which is clearly shown on this map. Each black spot represents a factory, and whilst the principal factories are concentrated near the rivers, hundreds of others are in housing areas. It is therefore intended to eliminate them from residential areas and to transfer them to this L-shaped industrial zone in the south and west. This is an essential preliminary to the proper replanning of the borough. The architect must constantly bear in mind that West Ham is part of Greater London, and his proposals must conform with the Abercrombie Master Plan. A decision had to be taken as to the future population of the borough, and the figure of 165,000 was determined and was incorporated into the main plan. On the basis of this intended population of 165,000, the new West Ham is being planned. A close study was made of the whole area, and before the end of the war, schemes were prepared for the division of the borough into neighbourhood units. The neighbourhood is an attempt by modern town planners to recreate within the towns that spirit of community which existed in small towns and villages before the industrial age. Let us hear how this is to be done in West Ham.
Here is a map of West Ham showing how the borough is to be divided into 16 neighbourhood units from which industry has been eliminated. Two main roads divide the borough, the Romford Road in the north and the Barking Road further south. Then transversely across the borough runs the embankment familiar to all West Hammers, the northern outfall sewer. Then again there is a network of railways, and finally the remaining major roads and trolleybus routes. These roads and railways and the sewer embankment afford obvious boundaries for the neighbourhood units, but the new road system plan for London provides for 3 new major roads across West Ham. One of these will start at the bridge across the River Lee at Canning Town and will follow this route to join the existing Beckton Road. This will eliminate the present awkward turn at Trinity Church, one of West Ham's danger spots. A second road will link up the Silvertown Way with the Lee Valley Road, running north through Stratford and Temple Mills. This is perhaps the most essential of the new roads to West Ham, for it will take the heavy dock traffic which at present filters through back streets, Liverpool Road, Manor Road, Leighton Road, where children play and tradesmen make their deliveries. The third route will link with the Silvertown to Stratford Road, somewhere near West Ham Station. It will follow the line of the northern outfall sewer for some of its length, will serve the Albert and King George V docks, and will eventually dive under the Thames or leap over it to reappear on the South Woolwich bank. Given these barriers, we had then to define the boundaries of the neighbourhood units we were planning. We planned for 16, giving an average population of some 10,000 in each. They cannot be created overnight, of course, but every step in the rebuilding of West Ham, every decision as to where a school, a factory, a library or a pub is to be built, is taken with this plan in mind. It forms the basis of all our town planning schemes.
Neighbourhood 15, the area known to West Hammers as Tidal Basin, is an island contained within 4 main roads. The Barking Road on the north, carrying a heavy passenger and goods traffic. the Freemasons Road, a trolley bus route skirting the eastern side of the neighbourhood, the Victoria Dock Road, bounding tidal basin on the south, with the railway forming a further barrier, and the Silvertown Way, approach road to the docks on the west. The area lying within these four roads was almost obliterated by the heavy bombing of 1940. The reconstruction of this area was planned to provide for a population of 12,000 in place of the 32,000 who lived there before the war. This requires a completely new road pattern, and the pre-war layout is being changed in 4 stages. This is the first stage, already largely completed, and for this second stage, land is now being purchased. When the third and fourth stages are complete, the neighbourhood will be a new town, housing a population equal to that of Seven Oaks. It will have 40 acres of open space. Pre-war, it had none. Neighbourhood 15, now known as Keir Hardie Estate, is daily absorbing huge quantities of material. A vast municipal operation has begun, and by mid-1948, the council has placed contracts to the value of £2 million. War destroyed the old tidal basin, clearing its crowded streets ruthlessly, but more effectively than peacetime methods could achieve. And here are the beginnings of a new West Ham. The first instalment of a plan of which Keir Hardie Estate forms but a small part. The first neighbourhood comes to life. I am one of the blokes who build the houses. Came out of the army a couple of years ago. I was in Libya mostly. Artillery. Sergeant too. Sometimes it was pretty tough. But when I come back to West Ham, I could see that it had been pretty tough here too. So now I'm building houses. It's nice to see 'em going up, isn't it? Well, it's better than knocking 'em down. Blimey, look at Charlie. He carries that blooming odd up and down the ladder 100 times a day. It almost makes me glad I'm a brickie. He's got another one to do yet too. They're working on the top stack. Stick it, Charlie. By the summer of 1948, West Ham had built 650 houses. On the Keir Hardie estate alone, over 300 were already occupied. 500 more were under construction. In all, 3,250 people had been rehoused, and families were moving in at the rate of 60 a month. The first blocks of flats, too, were approaching completion. Modern and spacious in design, the first of these became ready for occupation in May of 1948. A general view of an unfinished sector of the estate shows us houses in every stage of construction. Foundations, brick walls, roof timbers, houses already roofed in, and houses ready for occupation. The changed road pattern in this area means that the old supply lines for gas and water, telephones and electricity had to be reorganized. The electricity of the Keir Hardie estate is to come from the generating station on the River Lee. A large-scale extension of this power station is being carried out by the Central Electricity Board, and the borough architect has to take this new building into account when planning this area. Let him tell us something of this scheme.
The old power station at Canning Town was badly damaged during the raids, and now as workmen repair the roof, a great new building takes shape below. My department is not responsible for this building, of course, but we are keenly interested in the rapid progress that is being made. The massive foundations of the new powerhouse give an idea of the size of the structure. The output of the old station was 75,000 kilowatts. The new will have a capacity of 180,000 kilowatts. 3 gigantic cooling towers will be the principal feature of the building, and rising to a height of 225 feet, these unfamiliar giants will soon dominate this section of West Ham's industrial skyline. The output from this new station will help to modernize many of our older factories and reduce the smoke menace of their chimneys.
In April 1947, the first houses on the Keir estate were ready for occupation. The installation of the first tenant was a tiny step towards the fulfillment of the West Ham town plan, and it was proper that the occasion should be marked by ceremony. In the audience was the tenant, Mr. Cook. During the war, he worked in an aircraft factory. It was bombed, and he lost an arm and a leg. His home had previously been destroyed, and he and his wife and 2 children were living in one room. The door is formally opened by Dr. Commins, Member of Parliament for Silvertown. The Vice Chairman of the Reconstruction Committee, Alderman Mrs. Gregory, who in 1948 became its chairman, reminds her audience of the difficulties confronting West Ham and of the Council's plans to meet them. Soon the little ceremony concludes, and councillors move off to inspect the new houses. Within a few yards of the little gathering, work proceeded uninterrupted. Steady progress has been made, and the furniture van is now a familiar visitor to the new roads of the Keir estate. And when you have been living for years in someone else's home, your whole family perhaps in one room, to have a house of your own seems almost unbelievable. One more family is in. They begin their new life in surroundings almost unique in West Ham. This model, true to scale in all its details, makes clear the plan for the transformation of Old Tidal Basin. The open layout and the careful siting of various types of building is evident from the model. This is the existing Silvertown Way, showing the factory belt by which it will be flanked. Here is the viaduct carrying it over the railway. On the perimeter of the neighbourhood, 3-storey flats are sited, some of which are already complete. In the heart of the neighbourhood lies a green, with a school on one side, and across the open space, a community centre and other civic buildings. And so these men are not merely building houses for the council in Tidal Basin. They are building a new town, as surely as if they were working at Harlow or Hemel Hempstead. It is Sunday morning. Harry, a little conscious of his Sunday suit and his first pair of long trousers, has wandered from Silvertown to Tidal Basin and looks with interest at the new houses. He remembers what his teacher said about the houses they put up in this very spot 80 years ago. Even amid the muddle of construction, Harry sees that these new streets and houses are different from those of his own Silvertown. He begins to understand that what is happening here will soon happen in Plaistow and Canning Town and Stratford. Harry's friend Roy is also on a journey of discovery. The boys are surprised at the novel layout of the new houses. The houses they know are built in rows. They thought houses had always to be built in rows, and are interested to see that these are built about a quadrangle. Harry is eager to point out other discoveries, but Roy drags him off to see the new school which is being built nearby. The approach road is made too narrow for fast traffic in order to be safe for children. If in your imagination you can clear away the muddle of building, you can already see the shape that the neighbourhood is taking. Here grass and trees will soon be growing, and the new houses will look out upon a village green in tidal basin. On the fringe of the Keir Hardie estate, the old stands in striking contrast to the new. These houses are not packed as closely as the bylaws will permit. They have ample space about them. This mother may leave her baby outside her front door in quiet and safety. Many large families living in overcrowded conditions have been rehoused on the estate, and new schools must be provided for these children. As with the old type, grim and ugly schools of yesterday be replaced by buildings of modern design, such as this school now being built to replace one destroyed by bombing. It will accommodate 270 junior children. The old school, on a smaller site, had to cater for 700. It is designed to admit the maximum amount of light and air to all rooms, and every care has been taken to make it a building worthy of its purpose. This model is rapidly being translated into reality. Here is a series of classrooms designed so that the main windows face south, while subsidiary windows on the north side give even distribution of light and cross ventilation. These modern buildings involve far less brickwork than the old type school, and the light steel frame construction makes for speed of erection. Precast roof slabs enable a small team of workers to lay a roof in a short space of time. This school is but one of 4 in course of erection. 2 of these are features of the Keir Hardie estate, and the other, a larger 2-story building, is a technical school to serve the north of the borough. The transformation of the whole of West Ham will not reach completion for more years than it is yet possible to estimate. And so it is fitting that the central figures of this story should not be councillors or members of Parliament, planners, architects or surveyors, but the children of West Ham's back streets. The new West Ham is not for our generation, but for that of Roy and Harry. What we can but plan, they will enjoy.